Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Licensed Psychologist Now What? Today I have one of the guests that I interview for the Beyond Resilience Live. One of the interviews that I enjoy the most was with Maritza Placencia. She is amazing, and I feel like it's such a treat that she's one of the first guest for this podcast. And today we're going to talk about something a little bit different, but still, I feel like, and whenever somebody asks me for couples, I'm like, I know this therapist, but she's probably full, but she's really good. So just get on their wait list. I can keep talking about Maritza. So I'm so thankful that you're here and welcome to I was going to say to the Beyond Resilience Life. Oh my God, still adjusting. The licensed psychologist. Now what? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's so can you share a little bit about you and your services and what you love the most?
So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I currently focus my niche in private practice is in working with adults only. I work with individuals and mostly couples dealing with relationship issues, mainly stemming from trauma. I'm trained in emotionally focused therapy, in EMDR, in brain spotting, and also I integrate energy healing, I integrate spirituality. So there's a lot of the way that I work with, whether it's couples or individuals, it's a little different than what you would typically expect in working with someone who specializes with relationships. Yeah. So and as far as what I love the most, I think the part that I love the most in working with the population I work with is connecting with the people and connecting on the deep level that I get to connect with them. Um, it's really it's really something else. It's really intimate the way that I get to connect with the couples and the individuals that I work with. I get to not just hear about their relationship issues and about their traumas, but I get to really understand and help them connect the dots, not just from psychological standpoint, but also energetically, also spiritually. It's just such a special thing to work with. So I love that the most.
Mm, that sounds so refreshing in
Yeah.
many ways because it's not like you mentioned connecting to a deeper level. And isn't that what many of clients when they go to therapy, when I seek therapy, is like that repairing of that connection of being seen, being heard. Is not just not give me tools of what to do. I can get that via a coach, a book, but
Yeah.
it's more like I want to be seen. I want to be seen and held with all my complexities. And I
Yeah.
feel like in a way, spirituality adds a little bit to that because traditional training, I mean, I'm not training in brain spotting or EFT, but I'm training in EMDR. And models like that don't necessarily talk about connecting. It's more like, let's learn this skill so you can move people from trauma to like relief of trauma or something, processing the trauma. But yes, it's implied to have that sense of empathy and all that, but it's implied. It's not necessarily discussed as the method. The method is the
Yeah.
movement of the eyes, the tapping, and all this kind of stuff. So when you say that, and I feel like in moments like what we're living right now is so many people feeling disconnected about themselves, about each other, that when you said that, it was so refreshing. And and I have not been your client because I'm your friend. Otherwise, I might have, but but I definitely can tell that like intuitively that whoever it's in your space, which is that's your office and your space, and which I think now you're mostly online.
Yes.
Yes,
I'm only online
only
currently.
online. Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, so even you're mostly online, look at the beautiful back that you did. It feels like like you're in an office. So it's that sense of space holding that I
Yeah.
feel like that could be the energetic and the spiritual skills to help welcome that. So just want to say that back to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's as you were saying what you were saying right now and highlighting the connection part, I thought about how part of the work that I do also, I bring myself a lot into it, which is something that I know, just kind of the way that I the way that I listened to your first episode and I was thinking about, what I would share and I thought about how, we're taught in school to not really bring ourselves into the space with the client. And when I talk about connecting with clients, I'm talking about bringing myself into the space as well, right? Bringing myself in the way that I allow myself to cry with my clients if necessary. And if it feels helpful to them, as long as it doesn't feel like I'm getting in the way of their process, right? So that's one of the ways that I help them connect or that I connect with them. And a lot of the times I find that it's really, really powerful.
Mm.
It's really powerful for them. I've had clients who have, said that they've never had anyone else to cry with them. And
Mm. Just listening to that in itself is like,
yeah,
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 yeah. It's like we're not allowed to cry. And then we internalize and we don't allow ourselves. I know because I feel uncomfortable when I'm in a room with other people or, and I start crying but it's all that internalized that is a bad thing. Hold it, be strong. Don't show
yeah,
your vulnerability. And I mean, I can see why from an ancestor's perspective, don't show your vulnerability. It's a way of, that's how they survived.
yeah,
So yeah, I can empathize with that. And at the same time, it's holding us back.
yeah, yeah. And it's so powerful to talk about crying with clients when I'm working with couples and I end up crying with couples.
Mm.
It's like, you know, it's almost like normalizing that for them so that they can learn to do that with themselves, with each other, right? So
Mm.
that they can learn to connect with each other in that way,
Yeah.
right? We do talk about a lot of, I do find myself, because I mainly work with Latinx individuals and couples, I do find myself a lot of the time talking about why it is that we don't normalize crime, right? Why the immigrant experience, for example, why we were taught not to cry, right? Because it gets in the way.
Yeah.
It gets in the way of moving forward. It slows us down. And so it's one of those things where I think that also makes that's part of the energy work, is
Mm.
learning to move the energy that is within us, learning to move it in a different way than what we were taught.
Mm.
So yeah.
I feel like we dived in, which is awesome and beautiful. And at the same time, people might be like, can we backtrack a little bit and share?
Yeah.
Like, so let's backtrack for them. Because I mean, for me, I'm like, ooh, this is juicy. Let's keep on going. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I love going deep. Can you share with us a little bit about your education? I know you mentioned you're a licensed marriage and family therapist, but like your education and the impact of it.
Yeah. So I can, I feel like I need to share a little bit of where I started, where my journey started before graduate school, just to make a little
Sure.
bit of sense. So I started off when I was in high school, I started off wanting to be a nurse. And while I was in high school, I was taking nursing classes in community college, determined that I was going to be a nurse. And then I still went ahead and I applied to, go to different universities, and I got in. And I think because I was the first in my family to apply for going to college, I wasn't necessarily like in a place where I knew what to expect. It didn't seem attainable. It didn't seem like I was going to be able to actually make it happen without going through so many hurdles. And so what I did is I ended up applying. I got into a biology program at UC Irvine. That was my dream school. And I got in, and then I was like, okay, well, maybe I won't be a nurse. Maybe I'll be a doctor.
Oh, wow.
and and I just knew that I wanted to work where I would be in the position of helping people. And I feel like I was already intuitively connecting to that side of me, to that healer side of me. And so that's kind of where I went. First year I get to UC Irvine. It was super competitive, super just viciously competitive.
I can
If I
only
may put
imagine.
a word
Yes.
to that, to the level of competition. I'm talking about, students ripping out pages of the books that you could only access because it was on reserve at the library,
Oh, wow.
just the way that you were graded and so forth. And so very quickly I learned, this is not the environment I want to be in. It was actually making me sick to be in that kind of environment. I ended up getting so sick, and not, I'm not just talking about physically. I mean, when I look back, I think about how physically sick I was getting, how much anxiety I was experiencing at the time. And I think to myself, now that I know what I know about energy, energetically speaking, oh, like what was I doing to myself, right? Being in that environment. So it was thanks to this mentor I had at UC Irvine through a program for minorities I that I was able to, for the first time, be referred to therapy. I didn't know it at the time, but she herself was a marriage and family therapist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so she came to me, she came to my dorm. She said, let's go for a walk. She asked me what's going on. She heard me out, and she said, you need to go to counseling. You need to go to the counseling center. You need to connect with a therapist, and you need to do some therapy, and you need to figure out what your next step is, because I'm concerned for you. So my grades were suffering. So because I was physically sick all the time.
Mm, mm.
And so, I listened, I was very diligent. I scheduled my appointment. I went in there, and I remember the look on this therapist's face. She was a very young Asian woman, who was a psychologist, I think she was newly licensed. And I just remember the look on her face when I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know where I'm supposed to start, but I was like, here you go. This is my life story, right? At that age, I mean, I think I was 19 by that time. And at that age, I was just, all right, I don't know. I have no filter, right? And I
Right.
told her all of my trauma, I think in like one sitting. And when I tell you the look on her face was like she
Petrified.
wanted to like run. She wanted to like just like didn't know what to do with me. I was like, oh, like that made me realize I think I have a lot here. And I think and it made me realize I hadn't really stopped to think before then how much I hadn't dealt with. And so that was my first experience with counseling.
Mm.
I did it for a short period of time because it was through the school, and it was short term. I ended up graduating with my bachelor's in criminology and in English,
Mhm.
criminology because I think I found myself in that area because of my trauma, having dealt with being my family at different instances having to deal with being victims of crime, and also having criminals in my family, and so the whole mumbo jumbo of that. And so I wanted to understand the criminal behavior. And I ended up taking a lot of psychology classes as a result.
Right, because it's very
So
related.
I was fascinated with this. I end up that leads into the English degree was just because I wanted to stay longer in school because I wasn't ready to confront the adult world and didn't want to go get a job.
Good for
So
you.
can I add another degree? Whoever will take me, I'll do your degree. And they took me. And it was so
Yes.
much fun. I got to take poetry. But even if I think back to it, even that in itself was part of my formation.
Yes.
In the healing arts, right?
Yes.
Because I took poetry classes. I read philosophy. I feel like a lot of the stuff, a lot of the discussions had to do on some level with spirituality,
Yes.
with the meaning of life.
Yes.
Right? So I hadn't thought about that until right now.
Yeah, no, but it makes completely sense. Yes.
So I graduate, I end up working with victims of crime. I become a victim advocate. During that time, I knew that wasn't it. I knew that I needed to go beyond that. And it took me a whole year to realize where I wanted to go. So I decided I'm not going to go to grad school right away. I did get into a social work program right out of undergrad, but I decided I can't because of some of the questions they asked me. Like one of the questions I remember that really scared me was, would you be willing to remove children from their home for their safety?
Right.
And I was like,
Yeah.
remove kids from their families? What? Like I couldn't hear the for their safety part.
Right.
Right. That didn't click for me. And so I just remember thinking I can't be a social worker. I can't separate families, and so I ended up just, nope, not gonna do it. And they were offering me a full scholarship.
Oh my.
I look at my student loans, I'm like, not sure I made the wisest decision, right? But anyway, so I ended up turning it down. I ended up taking a whole year, and I decided I'm gonna just take all these classes for fun. We'll see what I end up taking. So I went to community college. And I decided to just have fun. When I looked at the end of that year, when I looked at my transcript, I had taken all psychology classes. And so, but here's the thing, they weren't even like your typical psychology classes. They were like fun classes. They were classes where it almost felt like I went to community college to continue therapy.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of the professors I ended up taking classes with, they were therapists in private practice. And they would run the class. They would facilitate the class in a way that it really got you to reflect, to go and like really learn about yourself. So
I love those classes.
so much about myself. I became so aware of certain things. I was like, oh my God, And so at some point, I think that's what led me to finally commit to therapy. And to commit to therapy in a way that I was like, okay, there are so many stones that haven't been turned over, and I need to get underneath what these stones are covering in my life so that I can understand myself. And I, in amongst all this, or in the course of all this, there was a lot of talk here and there that would come up about, on my dad's side of the family, my tío, or my dad's tío, who was a healer, a well-known healer in, I think it was in Manzanillo, Mexico.
Como un
I
chamán.
remember it was in Guadalajara. What was that?
Like a shaman, or how they would they call?
So
Yeah.
so he was considered somebody who would be sanador de luz blanca.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he um he basically would, the way that the stories that I heard were that he belonged to a community of healers that would go into the mountains, and they would practice their healing with each other. They would have ceremonies, and then they would come back and they would make themselves available to the people.
Wow.
And I heard stories even before, I was an adult. I heard stories about how his healing had healed, different family members.
Mm,
And it always stuck with me. It always was something that kind of I would hang on to. And
mhm.
I felt a special relationship with that. I felt there was something there when I was supposed to, and I feel like I'm backtracking even further, but
Yeah,
I,
no,
I
yeah.
feel like it's an important piece. When I was supposed to meet him, because of stuff I was dealing with that my parents felt I needed to go see him for when I was a minor,
Mhm.
um, he basically passed away 2 weeks right before I was supposed to meet him.
Oh no.
When my parents were making arrangements for me
Oh.
to go get some healing from him.
Mhm.
So I remember feeling like that was a loss
Yeah.
for
Mhm.
me, even though I never met him, because I felt like I had come so close to something that I needed to be close with. And
Yes.
so then I think that's what, sometime later, a few years ago, led me to want to get trained in Reiki,
Yeah.
because that was the closest thing that I could feel was similar to that. Um,
I can
I
see that.
also, yeah, I also grew up with hearing about my great grandmother and how um, she was like a good bruja from the pueblo where
Mm.
she was from, and how she was basically someone that would uh, bring healing for the people, and she was really highly respected and
Mm.
sought after. And so I used to hear some stories, not as detailed as from my uncle, but um, that was on my maternal side. My mom would talk about whatever she knew. Here and there, I would hear stories from my tias. And so that was another piece that was like, mm,
Yeah.
okay,
You come
but
from a
then,
lineage of healers.
yes,
Yes.
yeah. And so
And you
for
are a
me,
healer. Yeah.
yeah, so for me, it was like, I need to keep it, I need to like legitimize whatever, like almost like let me disconnect from that. There was a part of me that was really scared of the stigma, really, really
Of
scared of the
course.
stigma.
Yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you. Mm-hmm.
And so I found myself then deciding to go to graduate school to become a therapist. So I went to Alliant International University, and I decided, okay, if I'm going to be any kind of healer, it's going to be one that is licensed, one that is
Like
respected.
a
Yeah,
legitimate one, right? Like
yeah, one that is
with a little card
legitimate,
or something.
recognized.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I'm not going to deal with the stigma. I'm not going to deal with any of the I used to see it as danger, any of the dangers that healers um, have dealt with for generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, one of the things that we really focused on when I was an English major was learning about the witch trials,
Mm-hmm.
in Massachusetts. And I remember thinking, like, I don't want to be a witch burning at the stake,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, I mean, we have our own. I feel like we can still have our own modern day, witches burning at the stake.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what I wanted to avoid.
Yeah.
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 So that's kind of what led me to get a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. Um,
Yeah.
not, you know, not wanting to explore outside of that at first. Yeah.
Yeah. I I can empathize and relate so much to wanting to find, I guess, when you're looking at all the different options, finding a profession that is legitimized and that, it's structure and that it will be acceptable. But
Mhm.
then down the road, when you close the door, you can do, and do more different things. And it's so interesting because I did feel the same. I have an undergrad in psychology and I took all these classes, fun classes, and that they would go into the philosophy behind psychology, which is the study of the psyche, and that part included the spiritual part. So, and then when I went more to grad school and it was more specific and more, my school was very CBT and what's the conceptualization of the case? What are the treatment goals? What are, what is the plan, the prognosis, and all those kind of stuff. It kind of took me a little bit away, but I feel like really honing back to you as a healer, because you are a healer, you come from a lineage of healers, so
Mhm.
it's like you're reclaiming that. And I
Yeah.
wonder, how was it for you to then make the decision to go into Reiki? Because I bet that probably was a journey in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like I had no choice.
Mm.
Um, so if I want to stick with just Reiki, at the time when that happened, trying to remember if it was before or after. It actually was right after. Yeah, it was right after. So my grandfather dies.
Sorry to hear.
My Thank you.
Mhm.
It was expected. It wasn't something that we didn't know was coming. I actually got to say goodbye to my grandfather. I
Mm.
got to visit him 2 weeks prior to him passing. I got to spend, a moment, even though my grandfather could no longer speak and he was no longer mobile. I got to spend a few moments with him alone, and I got
Mm.
to tell him that I loved him, and I got to kiss him, and I hugged him, and I could tell that he understood what was happening. So that experience. So 2 weeks later, I have this experience where it started this it almost feels like it was a dream because it was a period of
Oh.
time. The day that my grandfather passed, I was coming back from, getting a massage. And long story short, I ended up feeling really tired. And I get home and I tell my husband, can you please get us lunch? I need to take a nap. I go and I take a nap without taking my shoes off, without taking my sunglasses off. I just collapsed on the bed.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband couldn't wake me up for 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
So I go into this sleep, and when I woke up, I tell my husband, I wasn't in my body. I
Mm.
wasn't in my body. It was the weirdest experience ever. So I got to see myself walking towards this, altar, and seeing how my grandfather was being put into the ground behind the altar.
Hmm.
And so I wake up and I tell my husband, I think my grandfather is dying, or he died already. And my husband's like, that's weird. Don't say that. That's scary.
Right,
Like,
right.
he's like, don't talk about that, right? And
Yeah.
so I was just like, I was eating my lunch, my cold lunch. Because
Mhm.
by
Yeah.
this time I was already
Three
cold.
hours later, yes.
Yeah. And so I was just like, I'm in shock. I don't know what this means. It feels really weird. It was like an out of body experience.
Mm.
And then I remember thinking, am I like, do I need to be talking to my therapist about this. Like, what's like, do I need to take meds? Like, what's wrong with me? You know,
Yes.
like, am I having some kind of,
Right. Like a
psychosis
psychotic.
or,
Yes. Yeah.
yes, started like diagnosing myself, right?
Right.
And so I think less than an hour later, we're driving because we were supposed to meet up with one of my brothers. And my brother calls and he says, "Are you driving?" And I said, "No, I'm actually a passenger. My husband's driving." And he says, "Okay, well, grandpa passed away." And I was like, first thought I had was, it's my fault because I didn't say what I didn't call and tell them, right? But then we got off the phone and I was just like crying in shock. And my husband, he was like, it sounds like you, maybe you went off, you were off seeing your grandpa off, like,
Yeah.
lo
Like
despediste.
astral traveling. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the time I had no idea what that was.
Yeah.
Right. And my husband was like, "That's really weird." And at the same time, ooh, like, it sounds like you were there for him.
Yeah.
And so I was just very like, okay, all right. Next thing I know, we're headed down to, across the border for my grandpa's funeral. And at the funeral, I shared with some of my tias what happened. And that's where I got a lot more of the story about my great grandma. I got more details. So the funeral actually turned into almost like an experience where I was given or gifted more information about where I come from.
Wow. Full
And
circle.
yeah,
Yes.
and it was the weirdest thing. So the whole way to the funeral, the drive there, and the whole throughout, I had the craziest like third eye opening sensation,
Uh-huh.
and I kept going like this, because I was like, "What is this?" It feels like a hole in my
Or
forehead. Like,
something. Yeah.
it was the
Yeah.
weirdest thing, and it was like, it was so just, it was not necessarily uncomfortable. It was more weird, like I
Right.
was used to it. And so anyway,
Mhm.
we come back from the funeral, the cemetery, and that took me through a journey of that whole week. I just felt all this energy that I just couldn't explain. I end up going to this, you know, journaling class with meditation that turns out to be with, I didn't know that the facilitator was a medium. Um, that took me into a whole nother
Wow.
thing.
Yes.
Somebody there gave me a message about that my grandpa wanted me to know he was okay. They
Yeah.
described this picture that they couldn't have possibly known about.
Mm-hmm.
um, and basically gave me all this evidence that it was my grandpa coming through. And I was
Yes.
like, "Oh, what is this?" Fast forward to maybe no, it was like a month or two later. I think it was about a month. My aunt's husband gets really sick and he's in a coma. And I start hearing this message of, "You need to go and take him healing." And I was like, I don't know what this is.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what kind of healing I'm supposed to take him.
Mm-hmm.
I end up going, and I end up going into his room. The nurse thinks that I'm his daughter, that I'm my cousin. We
Mm-hmm.
do kind of look alike. And so the nurse says something to me. I didn't really pay attention. I was just there, like trying, like just staring at him, like not knowing what I'm supposed to be doing. But then as soon as the doctor comes in, the doctor starts telling me what the latest results are. Before I could tell her I'm not his daughter.
Right.
Okay. Well, one of the things I haven't shared is that up until this point, since a very early age, I've been fascinated with reading medical journals.
Ah.
I've been fascinated with learning about how the body works,
Mm-hmm.
how the cells work. you know,
Yes.
I've always been fascinated with that stuff. Part of why I at some point wanted to be a doctor. And so
Right.
the doctor starts telling me this, and all of a sudden it's almost like a weird, I don't even know how to describe it, but the best I can do is I start seeing what the doctor is telling me.
Mm. I think
And
there's a word for
so,
that, one of the clairs. I wouldn't know the name. Which one? Yeah.
yeah,
Clairvoyant or
maybe
yeah.
I don't, because I could see the body, the like the cells and like the
Wow.
blood. I could see what she was telling me. And
Mm.
so next thing I know, there was something in me that said, you just need to put your hands above him. And you need to do it here, here, and here. And so I go and I do it.
Mm-hmm.
I if I tell you, I had never sweat the way that I sweat doing that
Wow.
ever in my life. I'm not typically a person who sweats much.
Yeah.
It felt like I had been under the sun for hours, like in the desert hot
Oh my
sun.
God.
I was dripping sweat.
Wow.
I could feel it in I remember doing that, and I remember how bright the room felt, but I was tuning everything else out. I asked my cousin afterwards, because she was the only one that witnessed this.
Mm-hmm.
I said, was the sun really like in the room? And my cousin said, no, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that led me to, I forget how oh, I had found out there was going to be a training for Reiki. So that led me to, okay, I need to find out more about this, white light healing. Because then I kept thinking about my uncle. I kept
Right.
thinking about like, what did I just do? Like that whole entire day, I was having like these hot flashes. And then at some point I was like, am I going into menopause in my 30s?
Oh my goodness. Yes,
What,
yes.
like, what is happening? It was on a raining day, by the way.
Oh wow.
So,
Yeah, so there was not even like sun. And we're in
so
SoCal. It was in California.
it was in California, and it was in San Diego.
Yeah, so
So
yes.
yeah. So I next thing I know, the next month I'm actually taking Reiki.
Mm,
Um, during the Reiki training, one of the messages that I got was that the light of Reiki had already been given to me. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So anyway, so that's kind of how I ended up doing that. I remember seeing you at that event, at that
yes.
mixer, and we spoke about Reiki. You
Mm-hmm.
told me about pranic healing,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if you remember this, but
I remember that
I
you
reached
did.
out to you
Yes, yes.
afterwards, and because I was so like Reiki, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't sleep that whole night after.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told I needed to go get trained in pranic
Chronic
healing.
healing. Mm-hmm.
And so, thanks to
Mm-hmm.
our interaction, my energy healing training advanced to pranic healing. And so what I incorporate with clients is really a combination of all of that training. It's really a combination of the understanding, the knowledge that I've gained through all of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, because it's going to come through you with your own experience. I love hearing your story. And what keeps coming and popping for me is like you were like, nope, not that way. Nope, not that way. Nope, not like you were able to see the redirection and you were not afraid to take it. You were like,
yeah,
I'm not seeing this. I'm going to stay behind. You kept, going through the redirection and like a river, letting it flow.
yeah,
Yeah. And for those therapists that are hearing this and that probably would love to do it, but are afraid of what about, first of all, the licensing piece, or if they're still with supervisors or they work in an agency and what would you tell them?
You know, I think that, well, first of all, I think that there are people like you and I who are creating space that is meant to create safety for those
Mhm.
therapists.
Mhm.
Um, Last year, I created you know, the community of, it was really out of the need of, I just don't want to be alone during the pandemic,
Right.
right? But it's a very intimate little group of holistic therapists.
Yes.
And these are the things we talk about, right? So my advice would be find your people.
Mhm.
Even if you are still under supervision, find your people. We have therapists that are not, well, now they are, but that weren't licensed. That
Mhm.
when I initially started that group, and so um, that's my advice. Find your people. I think our field is it's so diverse.
Yes.
Diverse in the sense that I think more now we're seeing people of color in
Right.
the field, but that's not in the way that I mean it's diverse. I mean, it's more diverse in the sense that we have therapists that are believers of energy, non-believers, you know, somewhat open to it, extremely opposing to it, right? And
Right.
so I think that if you cannot find your people right away, where you're at because of, because the community's not there, you know, slowly find your people by connecting with those that are somewhat open to it. Those
Yes.
people will lead you to the other people,
Yep.
right? I feel like that's kind of how I was guided in some way.
Mhm.
I was fortunate enough that I worked at an agency where I remember the supervisor uh, talking to us about the Enneagram, and she had us do, like, let's all take the Enneagram test and find our type. Um,
Mhm.
we learned about the emotion freedom technique. I got trained in this modality called healing from your body level up,
Mhm.
which it's kind of it's very similar to EMDR, and but it has a spiritual component to it that is very like out there.
Mhm.
Anyway, the point is it's really out there.
Mhm.
And so you don't hear much about it because I don't think it's as popular.
I've never
But
heard of it. No, yeah.
yeah, so but it really introduced me. It allowed me to be introduced to things that we would consider unconventional in our field.
Yeah.
So I think, and that's what I mean by find your people, even if it means starting off with people that are somewhat open to it. Because if I went and I told those people that I was with back then what I'm doing now, how I'm doing things now, they probably would, I would probably get some, you know,
Right.
some comments,
Yeah. Some burning at the stake
approval.
ish. Yeah.
Yes. And you know what? It's funny because one of the people I actually ended up opening up to, and when at the beginning of
Mhm.
the journey that I was just talking to you about, and that person has not spoken to me since. And it was one of the somewhat open
Wow.
people, so
Yeah.
so
And
yeah.
and I bet, whoever is listening be like, but I don't have anyone that's somewhat open. I would even say, like, I'm right now reading a book about connecting with ancestors, and it's a psychologist.
Mhm.
And it's all about mentor, like being a medium in a way, or connecting to that other realm. And his name is Daniel Four, I think Foor. And there's so many books out there done by psychotherapists that are out there. So it's just that it used to be spoken about. I think the whole evidence based practices have made it, and trying to become a science, people would say it is a science and all that, has taken all these other parts. And the clients, we're not going to be serving everyone, but the clients that are open for this and are looking for that, they can benefit so much. So, and now you have someone else here. You can definitely reach
Yeah.
out to Maritza and, with her community when she opens, if she opens the doors again, and ask me questions. And I'm super open about it. And the reason, the whole when you were saying how you remember that I mentioned pranic, then it blew my mind thinking all the people that got involved for that. Because Linda Garcia recommended me to do pranic healing. She's like, I feel like you have to do it. We have to do it. And I took it while I was pregnant, first trimester. So I was there, but I was not there. I have to like redo the whole thing. So and then Adriana did a mixer that I was there. And then you were there. And randomly we ended up talking about it, like all the factors that had to get in the way for me, because as I was sharing it to you, I was sharing like, this was really cool, but I feel like I couldn't learn that much because I was like throwing out like nauseous. And wow. So I know we can keep on talking and we're like at the end, but I wanted to do the fire round questions. So it's like, I wanted to feel like a test, like a psychological test, more like fill the sentence. So my unique and special gift is.
This is the one that caused me the most anxiety.
Oh, okay, got it.
I'm gonna go
R, not is, R. Instead of is, R, maybe like several.
Well, I'm gonna go based on what people tell me. People say that I have a unique way of connecting with them, of making them feel seen. So
I agree with them. Yeah.
Thank you.
I am reclaiming
healing without all the red tape.
Ooh. I no longer subscribe to
questioning where I come from, questioning my ancestors.
If my ancestor would speak, they would say
they are proud of me for carrying their legacy.
And my wish for you is?
For you and for the listeners, to continue following your intuitive hits. Because I think that is the safest way to say that we are being true to ourselves and that we are being true to our purpose.
Yes. And that's what I hear from your stories. Like you got guided, you got the sign and you follow through. And that takes so much courage. So I just want to salute you for that and for following it. And I bet there was resistance, but they were still following. And that takes so much courage.
Yeah, there was a lot of resistance.
Yeah. As we're ending, Maritza, can you let our listeners know where they can find you, get to see your current, or if you want to share your current offerings, or if you have any?
I can be found at Mindful Quest RC or Mindful Quest Relationship Counseling.com. I'm on Instagram, not as active this year. I decided to take a little bit of a break this year.
Yes.
But I do have some ideas in the works as far as offerings that I will be, when I'm ready, putting out through Instagram. But there's ideas for groups, workshops, retreats. And that's kind of what's in the works. I'm also currently working on a book.
Mm.
Um, uh, Also deciding when I will be taking the step forward to starting my own podcast.
Oh, yes, yes.
um, but that's not something that is necessarily pressing for me. So,
Mhm.
if you end up following me or checking me out, know that that's something coming down the line.
Yeah,
If you liked any of the stuff or want to learn more about the stuff that I've shared today.
yeah. And I love that. One of the things that I feel like as I'm realizing my specialty is helping others reconnect to their medicine and bring it forward. And I feel like you're doing it. It's so beautiful. Even right now you're seeing there was a moment that that flower in the back end looked like a dove for a second. And I'm like, okay, it's not a dove, it's a flower, Liliana. But it looked like a dove. And then it was like, it's a crown. It's like you're wearing this beautiful white light
Yeah.
crown.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you, Queen of White Light,
Thank you.
for
And
this interviewing. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for you've been a big part with. I don't think you know this, but you've been a really big part of this journey. Um, because I feel like the way that I got connected to pranic healing and all the learning that has come through that, all of the knowledge that I get to incorporate now with clients when I talk to them about chakras, when I talk to them about you know even in the way that I incorporate energy healing without necessarily saying we're doing energy healing,
Right.
right? um, it's because of all the learning that I gained through being in the pranic healing community and taking those trainings. And so you've been a really big part of my development. So thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Mm, I receive it. And thank you for also reflecting that to me and reminding me to like go back and get the training. Now Luna is a year, almost and a half. So, because yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Maritza, this was such a treat. Any last thoughts you want to say, or as we're ending?
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to say is that if you're new in the field, or even if you're not new, but you've been too afraid to embrace these gifts, to embrace the healing, that the medicine that you carry within, um, because of licensure boards, because of or licensing boards, or because of what your colleagues, what your community is going to say, don't be. Don't be. We need more therapists that are not afraid to bring the medicine without the red tape, that are not afraid to incorporate it. There is a way to incorporate the
Mhm.
medicine, the
Yeah.
healing, in a way that fits, and also that accommodates to, if you really, you know, are worried about your license. Um,
Yes.
there is also a way that sometimes we can become so aware how powerful and how necessary the medicine is, that the license is only just kind of an addition to who we are,
Yes.
right? So
Yes. So important.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's it's about you showing up fully to do the work and to create the healing space that people need. That's really what it truly is about.
Yeah. When there's a will, there's a way. And you
Yes.
can do it definitely. I would say for those of you continued discussion interested, make sure to check out the coaching program, because we're going to be talking about some legal things of separating and this, because this is what holds a lot of therapists back. And it's
Yeah.
like, you don't like, yeah, there's ways that you can do it. And down the road, I don't know if I'm going to keep this license, to be honest. I know I have it for now.
Yeah.
And that's not going to take my training and my, I've been 13 years and you've been probably for a while as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
ah, thank you so
Yeah.
much. All righty, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.